This lake is called Michigami in the Ojibwe language, the language of a Native American tribe, but we're used to calling it Michigan. We're looking at one of the 5 Great Lakes of the United States, which the country is probably most proud of, at least because all of its 22,400 square miles are located within the United States. This means that Michigan is the only lake the country doesn't share with Canada. Plus, it's the second largest lake by volume among its Great Lake neighbors. On top of that, Michigan ranks 5th in the world for the amount of water it holds. Therefore, it's quite clear that a lot of densely and not so densely populated cities are located around the lake at the moment. Chicago, which ranks 3rd in population in the entire U.S., as well as Milwaukee, a city that ranks 31st by the same measure. There's also Green Bay, Evanston, and that city. Though wait a second, there's nothing here. Well, there used to be a city here until it accidentally destroyed itself, and the blame for that lies with Lake Michigan, no matter how strange that sounds. Lake Michigan. Let us say right away that the location of the city played a major role in its self-destruction. Although Lake Michigan provides water for 12 million people, it's definitely not a paradise. Living here, let's just say, comes with its own set of challenges. It's important to note that we're not talking about earthquakes here. Those are rare for the lake. This usually happens because of tectonic plate collisions and other related processes. Michigan, however, is almost right in the middle of the North American plate. So we're talking about something else. For example, you can often see tsunamis on this lake. This raises a logical question. Why, if usually the cause of this phenomenon is the shaking of the Earth's crust, climate, air pressure, wind, all these together lead to the formation of large waves? Actually, there's even a special name for tsunamis without earthquakes, Meteotsunamis. According to the Weather Channel, around 100 such events happen in the region every year. For example, in April 2018, the wind reached speeds of up to 71 miles per hour, and on top of that, a thunderstorm was raging, which caused waves up to 8 feet high. Just recently, in June 2024, the wind hit 75 miles per hour again, creating waves of considerable size. Yes, the waves in the case of a meteotsunami aren't the massive walls of water, sometimes over 100 feet high. However, they're more than enough to cause serious damage to the coastline and even to objects located some distance from the lake. The thing is, these kinds of waves are one of the main causes of shoreline erosion, a process where the water literally takes parts of the shore with it. And in situations like this, houses that are really close to the lake suffer the most. Over time, they might just collapse because there won't be enough land underneath them to keep the structure stable. Take a look at this map. Almost the entire eastern shore of Lake Michigan is just one big red line. And no, this isn't marking spots with great views of the lake. What we're looking at is a map showing the areas with the highest risk of shoreline erosion. There's no point in checking where each spot is. Literally, the whole coast is moving further and further away. It's worth noting that the creators of this map from EGLE's Water Resources Division didn't just mark the areas prone to erosion, but also specified that each point is a region where the water has receded by at least 1 foot or more every year for the last 15 years. Can you picture that? When you were born, the shore was in one place. After 15 years, almost the entire East Coast is shrunk by over 15 feet. Why is this shore more prone to erosion? Well, it's simply because the wind blows stronger here, causing bigger waves to hit the shore more often. And also, the western shore is more rocky with a lot of cliffs, while the eastern one, it's mostly sand. To be more specific, there are a lot of sand dunes. Thousands of square miles of sandy formations cover the entire eastern shore of the lake. They're located in a lot of national parks like Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore and Silver Lake State Park. Doesn't it seem strange that the whole area is covered in sand? It almost feels like we're in the Sahara, Gobi, or some other famous desert. But this is actually the eastern shore of Lake Michigan. Amazing. There's also Hoffmaster State Park and many other places where you can see sand formations. However, don't forget that sand dunes are also one of the reasons why the coastline of the East Coast is retreating further away. What's more, sand dunes are part of the story about the lost city. Singapore. You all know that Singapore is a developed island city-state in Asia. And no, we haven't gotten it wrong because there's a town with the exact same name in the state of Michigan. It's unclear why they chose this name, but the U.S. Embassy in Singapore said it's in honor of the Asian country, so let's go with that. This Michigan town was founded around 1837 by a New York landowner, O'Shea Wilder. Why? Well, at that time, on the other side, Chicago and Milwaukee were growing rapidly. So Wilder saw a great spot at the mouth of the Kalamazoo River, not far from the village of Saugatuck, and decided to create his port town, which would make good money. At its peak, the town had 3 mills, 2 hotels, several stores, and even a bank, which had put $50,000 into circulation by 1838. The town planned to make money in the most obvious way, by cutting down trees. Boats could easily dock in the town, and timber could be floated down the Kalamazoo River to settlements further downstream. A perfect business plan. As it turned out, the plan wasn't well thought out, but we'll get to that later. So back in the 1860s, most of the town's population was involved in logging. Everything was running smoothly. Trees were being cut down, floated downriver, and money was rolling in. Then came the moment when there was a chance to make even more money. A careless cow knocked over a kerosene lamp with its hooves. Anyway, let's not dwell on the rumors that followed this catastrophe. On October 8, 1871, a fire broke out in one of the many small barns of fast-developing Chicago. The Great Chicago Fire, as it's now known. After it was over, it became clear that the fire had destroyed an area about 2.5 miles long and 0.6 miles wide, with a total burned area of just over 3 square miles. More than 73 miles of roads, 118 miles of sidewalks, 2,000 streetlights, and 17,500 buildings worth $222 million were destroyed, leaving around 90,000 people homeless. Chicago was a strategic city, so it needed to be rebuilt right away. That's when everyone remembered Singapore, which was ready to supply wood. Moreover, the fire affected not only Chicago, but also Milwaukee, Holland, Peshtigo, and Manistee around the same time. That's why on the East Coast, along the Kalamazoo River, they started chopping down trees at a speed that Singapore had never seen before. And this is where the flaw of a business plan started to show. Singapore was built on the east shore of Lake Michigan, where there are a lot of sand dunes. During the deforestation, all the trees disappeared, so the sand started moving fast. Or rather, it started burying the city. These scenes, of course, don't show Singapore, but probably something similar was happening there. In the end, by 1875, no one lived in the city anymore. It was completely swallowed by sand. Sand dunes. But dunes and erosion were already a problem even before the trees were chopped down. So how did the destruction of the forest influence the city's destiny? In fact, Singapore was likely gradually sinking even before large-scale deforestation began, or possibly even before any deforestation at all. However, as the number of trees started to decrease, the process of sand erosion accelerated because every plant acted as a stabilizer for the sand dunes. Sand dunes form when the wind blows sand and it encounters an obstacle like a rock or plant. Then the same thing happens with more and more grains of sand, which gradually create a mound of sand that becomes anchored by the obstacle. In the early stages of dune formation, other stabilizers like certain types of grasses and other plants may also appear. In Singapore's case, trees acted as stabilizers. They did not allow the dunes to actively move anywhere. But once they were gone, the sand was let loose and it started drifting with the wind, looking for new obstacles to settle on. Those obstacles turned out to be the city's buildings. The inevitable result was that the sand consumed all of Singapore's structures. The fate of this small Michigan town wasn't as tragic as what befell many other ghost towns. No one died because it was clear to everyone that the town was slowly turning into a tomb beneath the sands. Besides, there were no more forests left to log, so many residents floated downstream along with the lumber mills. On top of that, a lot of the buildings were simply demolished. A single resident chose to defy the odds and remain. He stayed, observing as his home was gradually engulfed by sand, and by the time the sand reached the uppermost floor, this daredevil from a bygone era eventually moved away. There's no evidence to back up the story, but it's a fascinating one nonetheless. The Michigan Pompeii. The area where the town once stood looked something like this now. It's a popular spot for tourists who are told the story of a settlement buried forever under the sands. There's also a sign to prove the town really existed, dispelling any doubts about it being a mere legend. Archaeological finds made during the 2017 excavations led by Ball State University further support this story. This is only a fraction of the items found. More than 200 are claimed to have been discovered. Remarkably, a part of the city has been preserved in a way. You can visit a few houses in Singapore today in the towns of Saugatuck and Douglas. The main lesson to take away from Michigan's Singapore, or the so-called Michigan Pompeii, is a simple truth. Nature is not to be trifled with. And perhaps planning better business strategies wouldn't hurt either. Escape the dunes. The question arises, can we really escape the all-consuming sand dunes when nature hasn't done its part to hold them in place with vegetation, trees, stones, or other natural barriers? To see one method, you'll need to visit St. Pere Pescador, a charming town on Spain's sunny coast. Here, there's no need for advanced technology. Why use them when simple reeds do the job just fine? Or more like reed fences? They were set up in 2020 to restore the beach area, and it worked. Since 2021, project researchers have been monitoring the process, and as a result, it's been found that the dunes grew by 40% in 3 years. Maybe if they'd used this trick in the Michigan project, there would be 2 big Singapores in the world today. Another option is just to plant right on the dunes. For example, that's what they do at the Oceano Dune State Park in California. However, it's worth noting that they first spread straw, which temporarily stabilizes the sand, and only then do they plant the vegetation. In any case, if nature won't grow anything, people will take care of it. I guess this is probably the most advanced method right now, the trap bag system. These barriers are easy to transport to the needed location, but then you have to put in some effort. The dune needs to be dug up. After that, the system is stretched to the desired length and filled with sand, then the trap bag is buried again. So why dig so much only to fill it back in later? Don't forget that for dunes to form, the sand needs something to cling to, something to crash into. And so the bags become the core around which grains of sand accumulate, forming a stabilized dune. If needed, the trap bag system will also protect against shoreline erosion. For example, the company itself shows how its barrier was used on Lake Michigan. So there are a lot of ways to avoid the consequences of dunes moving and swallowing up entire buildings, and most of them could have definitely been used by loggers from the century before last. Yet another Pompeii. By the way, in the state of Michigan, there's also another Pompeii, but this time it's an actual city that exists right now. Its first name was actually Joe B, in honor of the first settler, Joseph B. Smith, and its real name, Pompeii, was given to the small town because of the post office that was built in 1856. Right now, Pompeii is a half-ghost town. The reason's simple and clear. The settlement thrived while it was on a major transportation route, but then in the 1920s they built a new highway, so traffic through Pompeii decreased. Tikal. In fact, due to deforestation, cities began to be abandoned long before the 1800s. People learned to cut down trees a long time ago, and an advanced civilization like the Mayans was certainly capable of doing so. This is what led to the downfall of the metropolis Tikal, located in northern Guatemala and thriving in the 3rd century BC. It had a population of 60,000, many tall temples, a developed infrastructure for its time, and a lot of trees. A lot because they were needed to build those temples and also to make the plaster that, according to researchers, covered the buildings and roads. It's claimed that after research on the ancient city, it was found that the Maya cut down 60% of the surrounding trees, and the density of tropical forests is a key factor for high humidity and rainfall. So the decrease in trees caused the ones who predicted doomsday in 2012 to leave their megacity in search of more livable places.